You know, it's been a while since I've played Doors. Let me just hop on real quick and... Oh man. Yeah, that is not really the best sight to see. In case you haven't caught on yet, it's only been a month since Doors released its Outdoors update, and the player count has completely reverted to its state prior to the update coming out. In fact, even the player count charts showed this trend, with the game reaching a peak with the release of the Outdoors, but then just it going right back to where it was previously. Now, I know these charts aren't the most truthful, as it doesn't even say the game broke 100k players during the update, which I know isn't true, but still, this is quite concerning. Now, if we look earlier at the game's life in this chart, this issue wasn't as bad as it is now. Of course, every game works like this. There'll be a peak of players when an update releases, but then afterwards it slowly dips. But it's been happening a lot quicker with recent updates. So, does this mean Doors is dying again? After all, it's going to be a long while until the next update, and the game is already not in a good state in terms of player count, so it may only get worse. Well, that's what I want to discuss today in this video. I want to get a full scope of the situation and go over what could be done to mitigate it. So, let's begin. Alright, so as I've said, the Doors player count has fallen right back to where it was prior to the Outdoors update, which obviously isn't a good thing. Before the Outdoors update, we were in the end of a content drought, so to see the same numbers right after an update release is definitely concerning. Now, if you are a longtime viewer, you may remember I made a similar video going over this dire situation before the Outdoors update was released. And in that video, I offered 3 main solutions to the problem, all of which the developers actually followed through with, which I appreciate. Those solutions were mainly to advertise updates more by releasing trailers a bit earlier than the day before an update release, and post more teasers in general, which they delivered on. In fact, I actually think that helped the Outdoors update reach more people, which I am definitely a fan of. I also said that maybe they should do more frequent mini updates, which were also somewhat delivered on with the release of semi-frequent item skin bundle releases. So if the developers are taking these steps to increase the player count, why hasn't it seemingly worked? Well, this is for 2 main reasons. For one, advertising updates only works for building update hype. Now that the Outdoors has released and the hype has passed, the efforts went into building that hype by posting frequent teasers just isn't effective anymore. Additionally, although the releases of new content every so often in the form of item skin bundles is a step in the right direction, there is one pretty major flaw with relying solely on that to keep the game alive during periods without major updates. And that is how item skins aren't really cared about by a lot of players. Don't get me wrong, I love item skins and I am definitely excited to see more of them be added, but receiving new bundles each week doesn't really incentivize me to play the game. I could just look in the shop, see the appearance of the skins, buy them if I like them, and then just leave the game. It's not like a proper gameplay update which forces you to play in order to experience all the new stuff. Anytime a new bundle drops, you could just hop on, see what's new, and immediately leave the game afterwards. Continuing that point, item skins are completely cosmetic and optional to obtain, so I'm sure there's a portion of the community who just straight up doesn't care about them. Releasing weekly item skins is cool, but due to the way item skins themselves work, it's not really an effective method of keeping the game alive. So that brings up the question of what is, and that's largely simple: gameplay. I believe that if the developers want to keep Doors alive through more frequent miniature updates, they can't just include item skins, but they must also have some sort of gameplay change in them. It doesn't have to be anything super big, but just something that forces people to actually explore the world of Doors to see what's new. For example, as I'm sure you all know, Wade is a planned entity who has been sitting on the shelf for ages unimplemented. What if one of these mini weekly updates just added him alongside the normal item skin bundle? I don't think it's too big of a task to just add a single new entity and nothing else. And given how popular entities are indoors, I'm sure players would be incentivized to check Wade out if they were added alone in one of these weekly updates, especially if badges for encountering and crucifying them were implemented. Another example would be one of these mini updates including the Caw rework I mentioned in a previous video. Essentially, one of the unconfirmed ideas the developers had was to rework Caws to be more unique, such as granting them the ability to detect monuments and be fed birdseed. I think this feature is small enough to be a great addition in one of these weekly updates to help get people engaged with the gameplay of Doors. Now, new gameplay content doesn't need to be released every week. I feel that could be draining for the developers, but maybe bi-weekly or monthly could be a good schedule to help keep the game's player count afloat. I myself wouldn't mind a slightly delayed or smaller major update if some of its features were released early in these miniature updates. Now, if the process of releasing gameplay content more frequently is too much of a hassle, then there's also the route of adding a major gameplay update which stimulates engagement for an extended period of time. This is something not really indoors currently, simply due to the nature of the game. Once you beat everything, there's nothing left for you to do. So, what if there was? Fortunately, we got a glimpse into that alternate reality with the release of Ranked Mode. For those unaware, Ranked Mode completely flipped the script of Doors, turning the horror aspect into a competitive one. Players had to race and fight each other to gain the most points in a fast-paced brawl, and the winners would progress through various ranks. This game mode was removed, but I think if it was a permanent addition, then it couldn't do the game wonders. Ranked Mode added a reason to play Doors after completing the main game, and it was genuinely some of the most fun I ever had playing Doors, so I definitely feel it could be revamped and re-implemented into a future update. In fact, even the developers shared this idea, as they asked at one point if players would like to see the game mode make a resurgence, possibly with new content, such as the introduction of these cool new items which I believe were once scrapped from the initial release of the game mode a couple months back. If Ranked Mode did return and was made very apparent through elevators in the lobby, I think a lot of people would continuously play it simply due to how it's structured as a competitive brawl, rather than a level that, once completed, has no need to be replayed like the rest of the game. It could be even better if this new Ranked Mode was tied to progression by adding the ranks back, and implementing even more so players have an incentive to continue playing. Really, I feel that Ranked Mode has the highest potential to make Doors have a maintained player count besides weekly gameplay content releases. So I feel if the developers don't want to make extremely frequent updates, then they could at least span the part of the game with the most replayability, and make it widely known so players actually play it with an incentive of doing so. Really, I just hate to see Doors in its current state of death. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It's very bad seeing the player count of the game after an update release to be the exact same as the player count after 4 months of content drought. It's not a good sign, especially since the efforts of the developers don't really seem to be doing anything, which really stinks, as I know they definitely deserve better. That's why I think more frequent, albeit minor gameplay updates, or an expansion to the most replayable part of the game, that being Ranked Mode, is needed in order to keep the player count afloat. As for the Ranked Mode thing, I definitely think it still needs to tie to progression heavily, either through ranks, or making those ranks have some sort of reward after being obtained. So, with all of that being said, let me know in the comments what you think of all of this, as well as what your own ideas for fixing this issue are, as these are just my takes. I'm curious as to what you think. And thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.